Hello students, today you are going to learn infrared spectroscopy. So in this slide you can see the two atoms are being connected with each other. They are coming closer to each other, moving away from each other. So there is change in the bond length. And in this particular figure you can see that this is a central atom to which two small atoms are connected, and the bond angle in between these two atoms is being varied. So in infrared spectroscopy, we are going to study the interaction of the radiation with the vibrating atoms. So what you are going to study in this particular chapter is the principle of IR, the fundamental modes of vibrations for any kind of polyatomic molecule. You are going to study the factors affecting the vibration. You will know the instrumentation, source of radiation, sample handling, wavelength selectors, as well as the type of instruments. You will study the detectors and the applications of IR spectroscopy. So this is first lecture. In this lecture, you will be studying the principle of IR spectroscopy and the types of vibrations in a molecule. So what are the key points for this particular lesson is IR spectroscopy is a type of molecular absorption spectroscopy. So I've studied the classification of spectroscopic technique as atomic versus molecule. Atomic techniques are used for performing qualitative or quantitative analysis of atoms, while molecular spectroscopic technique like UV, you are going to study interaction of electromagnetic radiation with the molecule. This is the absorption technique, means you are going to study the intensity of radiation absorbed by the molecule. Now, what is going to happen after absorption of this infrared radiation? There is change in the vibrational and rotational energy of the molecule. So it is also called as vibrational rotational spectroscopy. And this technique is being used as a qualitative tool. Okay, so very limited application is there for the quantitative analysis. UV you have studied last year. So this is used for quantitative analysis. UV has limited application in qualitative analysis, while IR in opposition is basically a qualitative analysis tool. It is used for detection of functional groups in a compound. So you can say surely that these kind of functional groups are there in a compound looking at the IR spectra. Each compound's IR spectra is unique. So it is a fingerprint of that particular molecule. So each person has his unique fingerprint. And when you go for the forensic analysis, when you take the fingerprint, you can definitely track out the person. So in the same manner, if you look into the IR spectra, you can confirm the compound also. So you won't get any two compounds with a similar or same IR spectra unless they are enantiomers. So this is the general way IR spectra looks like. So you might have seen in number of pharmacopoeias. So these complex spectra are being given. So wherein you see it is a plot of percent transmittance versus that of wave number. Misleadingly, we use number of times a term absorption frequency of IR band. Okay, so remember that this is not the frequency, fine. This is wave number which is expressed in per centimeter, but it is generally in common use said as frequency. So what you have is a plot of percent transmittance versus that of wave number. In UV, what you plot is absorbance versus wavelength. Okay. So in IR, what is being plotted is percent transmittance, which is opposite to that of absorbance. So if you say, if you have a clear solution which doesn't absorb anything, means the percent transmittance of that solution is going to be 100%. Oppositely, if it absorbs everything, in that case it is not going to transmit anything. So the percent transmittance of that compound is going to be 0. It will absorb maximum, but the percent transmittance is going to be 0. So on this scale, you have percent transmittance plotted on y-axis from 0 to 100, and on x-axis you have wave number in per centimeters. Okay, so is it looking exactly opposite to that of your UV, correct? UV, you get all straight peaks. All right, here you are getting those inverted fingers. All right, so why you are having this? Because we are having here a plot of percent transmittance. So if I'm getting here somewhere say 80%, means 20% of the radiation is being absorbed and 80% is transmitted. If I'm getting here a flat line, so means my compound is not absorbing anything, it is transmitting everything. But as you can see down here that the percent transmittance is decreasing. Okay, so it is going more deep, so means percent transmittance is decreasing, means absorbance is increasing, correct? So here my compound is been absorbing maximum. Here we are having a maximum absorbance, and then again it goes on decreasing. So have you noted this first difference in UV and IR spectra, that we are plotting a percent transmittance versus that of the wave number, and here your peaks look inverted. Apart from that, you can see that it's the spectra is very much complex. In unlike your UV barely you can see 2 to 3 peaks, but in case of IR, you can note that there are numerous peaks present in IR, and as you go down here, the complexity, okay, as you go down here, this side, the complexity of spectra is being increased. All right, so this region, we call this as a fingerprint region, okay. So it is looking very complex, and this particular region is a group frequency region. So we are using this for confirming the presence of certain functional group, while this particular region is being used for fingerprint matching. So this is beyond the scope of interpretation for humans, because the spectra is very complex, so you have to take the help of computer. So computer have their stored spectra. Suppose you take today the spectra of paracetamol, you record the spectra, the compound is not known to you. What you will do is you will try to have a match of this particular spectra with the spectra available into the library. So when you see the match in between the spectra, the computer will give you a hint that the compound is a paracetamol. Okay, so electromagnetic spectrum you have studied last year, wherein you have studied the interaction of X-ray and UV and visible radiations along with the matter. So if you start from this is high energy end to the right, to the radio waves, to the left, it is low energy end. So this particular energy, a high energy, maybe it's going to result in a uh, breakdown or ionization of the compound. If you go down to ultraviolet or visible radiation, this is going to respond. This will be responsible for electronic transition of the molecule. But when you go still at a lower energy side, means if you go to infrared, microwave, or radio waves, it is not capable of causing electronic transition. Okay, so it is just going to change the vibrational energy or the rotational energy of the molecule. So in here we'll be studying what infrared is going to cause to the matter. Okay, so as you go from this end, you have cosmic rays, gamma rays, X-rays, then you have ultraviolet, visible, and infrared radiation. So as you go along, what you see that the wavelength is being increasing, correct? So wavelength is been increasing. The distance in between two troughs or crest is being increased. With increase in the wavelength, the energy or the frequency or the wave number, it will go on decreasing. Okay, so there is inverse relationship in between wavelength and all other parameters. this is the way your light propagates. So only one component is being shown out here. It's a, say suppose this is the electrical component. So you know that electromagnetic radiation consists of electric component and magnetic component. These are perpendicular to each other, and they're also perpendicular to the direction in which light is propagating. Correct? So here suppose this is an electric component. If it is been shown, you can see that it is gradually increasing and decreasing. All right. Now in certain spectroscopic technique, you study the interaction of electrical component with the matter. In certain technique, you study interaction of magnetic component with the matter. In this technique, we are going to study the interaction of electric component along with the matter. Now energy of this light is being given by h nu, wherein h is the Planck constant and nu is the frequency. Frequency is the number of vibrations per second. Higher is the frequency, higher is going to be the energy. Same way you can give it in the form of hc upon lambda, wherein frequency has been replaced by the term c upon lambda. So these are interconvertible. So once you know the frequency, you can convert the frequency in terms of wavelength or in terms of wave number also. So mu is equal to c upon lambda. So lambda is the wavelength, correct? The distance in between two troughs or crest, it's called as wavelength, while frequency is the number of vibrations per second, which is also equal to hc nu bar. So nu bar is wave number. It is number of waves per unit distance. Okay, higher is the wave number, higher is the radiation energy of the radiation. So energy, frequency and wave number are directly proportional to each other, but they all are inversely proportional to wavelength. So we'll see the classification of infrared regions. So infrared regions are classified broadly into three. First is near IR, means immediately where your visible light ends, visible region ends, your near IR will start. Okay, near IR, followed by mid IR, and finally you have far IR. With the wavelengths are being given 0 0.8 micrometers, means it is 800 nanometers. So 0.8 to 2.5, which is also corresponding to 12,500 to 4,000 per centimeter wave number. Okay, then you have a mid IR followed by a far IR. So when you go from near IR is the high energy radiation in comparison to mid IR, and your far IR is the least energetic radiation. So as a consequence, when you see the type of interaction, so NIR is capable of inducing um, vibrational and rotational energy changes within in a molecule. Okay, so but what you'll see is overtones and combination bands. So right now it will be not clear to you, but as we proceed further with the explanation, this term will be clear to you. So what we will study in NIR is the vibrational overtones and combination bands. So the wavelength corresponding to NIR is 0.8 to 2.5 micrometer, while mid IR the wavelength is increased from 2.5 to 50 micrometer, wherein we use 2.5 to 15 micrometer widely. Okay, so 4,000 to 667 per centimeter is the most widely used region for structural interpretation. While in far IR, it is still higher wavelength region, and it is not going to cause any kind of vibrational energy change. It is just going to cause the rotational change, rotational energy change of the molecule. Okay, so this is a backbone. In UV you have studied that ultraviolet and visible radiations are capable of causing change in the electronic energy of the molecule. So the energy levels, you have seen that each electronic energy level is being further subdivided into vibrational energy level. So here you can see that there are numerous vibrational energy levels associated with ground state as well as excited state, and each vibrational energy level is further subdivided into the rotational energy levels. So these are numerous rotational energy levels associated with each vibrational energy level. So when you make UV incident on the same matter, what is going to happen is, apart from just simple change in the electronic energy level, there is accompanied change in the vibrational as well as the rotational energy of the molecule. Okay, so electronic energy is also accompanied by vibrational as well as rotational energy change within the molecule, and this is what has been seen in case of your UV. But in case of your IR, as the radiation is having a low energy, it is just going to cause the change in a vibrational energy of the molecule. So what is going to happen, that the molecule's vibrational energy is being changed after absorption of radiation from V0 to V1 or from V0 to V2. Okay, and now as each vibrational energy is there, class is again divided into rotational energy levels. When you change the vibrational energy of the molecule, naturally the rotational energy is also going to get changed. So that's why this particular technique you call this as an vibrational rotational spectroscopy. While in case of your far IR, the energy is weaker and it is not capable of causing this kind of vibrational change. It is just going to change the rotational energy of the molecule from R0 to R1. Okay. Now, as I've said, the vibrational energy can be changed from V0 to V1. So you will call this as a fundamental vibration. So when the energy is being changed from V0 to V1, it is fundamental vibration. And when it is changed from V0 to V2 or V0 to V3 and so on, you call this as an overtones. Okay. Now if you want to change from V0 to V1, you need less energy. From V0 to V2 or V3, you need a high energy. So, in case of mid IR, you can see all fundamental bands. But for near IR, you can see all those overtones. Okay, because NIR is a high energy radiation in comparison to mid IR. So, if you want to have a jump from V0 to V2, naturally you have to supply more energy, and this has been given by your near IR. So near IR, you can see all your overtones. While in case of mid IR, so in this right now we are going to study mid IR. So in mid IR, what you are going to have is all fundamental bands or fundamental vibrations. Okay, so let us see what is vibration in the molecule. So any vibration in the molecule is change in the shape of the molecule, which is accompanied by change in the bond length or bending of a bond, change in the bond angle. Okay, and very second important question what you have to answer is uh, whether during vibration there is change in the dipole moment of the molecule. Okay, so if there is going to be change in the dipole moment of the molecule, then only infrared radiation will be absorbed. All right. So like in case of UV, you know that if the compound has chromophore, then only it will absorb UV radiation. In a similar manner, if there is change in a dipole moment of the molecule during vibration, then only the infrared radiation will be absorbed. Okay, so we'll see why this is going to happen. Okay, simply if you see, take an HCl molecule, you know that there is a electronegativity difference in between H and Cl, Cl being partially negatively charged and H being partially positively charged. This molecule has its own dipole moment, okay, which is decided by two factors. What is the intensity of the charge on each of the pole, and second is what is the distance in between these two charges. Okay. Now, as we know that if we are saying something of a vibration, means there is a change in the bond length or there is change in the bond angle. Suppose now here the bond length is been changing. Okay, the distance in between H and Cl is been increased or decreased. Say bond elongation or compression has been taking place. So naturally there will be change in the charge density. Okay, here as the bond length is being changed, and there is also change the distance in between the two charges. So naturally the dipole moment is going to get changed. Okay, so as you can imagine this, what is going to happen is HCl is vibrating, there is change in the bond length, the bond is gradually elongating and compressing. Now when this is going to happen, this molecule is going to produce its own fluctuating electric field. Okay, which has its own frequency. Okay, so each bond is vibrating at certain frequency. Now when this interacts along with the infrared radiation, if the frequency of infrared radiation matches that of the vibration frequency of a bond, then only the molecule is going to absorb infrared radiation. Okay, and after absorption of infrared radiation, this energy is being used for increasing vibrational amplitude. Okay, vibrational amplitude is going to get increased. Now looking at the molecule, you should be able to tell whether this will be infrared active or not. For that we must know that whether there is any kind of dipole moment change associated with certain bond. Secondly, we should be even able to calculate the number of possible modes of vibration for a molecule. Okay. Now this is important for predicting the number of bands that can be seen in a compound. Okay. So for that, you must know what are the total degrees of freedom associated for molecule. Now suppose here you have two molecules, you can see one is a linear molecule and the second one is a non-linear molecule. All right. So this to your left is a linear molecule and to your right is a non-linear molecule. So each molecule, there are certain degrees of motions associated with it. Okay. Degrees of freedom is nothing but the number of motions associated with a molecule. So there are translational motions, rotational motions, and vibrational motions associated with a molecule. Total degrees of freedom of a molecule is equal to the sum of translational motion, rotational motions, and vibrational motions. So if you want to calculate vibrational motions, you must know the total number of translational and rotational motions associated with the molecule. So vibrational modes will be equal to total degrees of freedom minus translational mode and rotational mode. Now we can see how many translational and rotational modes are associated with a molecule. Now if you compare here, there are two types of molecules shown. One is a linear molecule and the other one is a non-linear molecule. Translation is a movement of an object from one place to another place. So for the defining translational motion, so in this figure you can see that for linear or non-linear molecule, uh, three modes are required. So the molecule can move either on the x-axis, or it can move on the y-axis, or it can move on the z-axis. So there are three translational motions associated with a molecule. Now, if you compare the rotational motions, wherein the molecule is going to rotate around x, y, and z axis. So, if you compare this molecule, which is going to rotate around x axis, so you can imagine out here. So, it will rotate around x axis, and it is going to need some kind of energy to rotate around x-axis. Same way, if you compare now, the molecule has been rotating around y-axis. You can imagine it will rotate like this, and it is going to need some energy for performing this rotation. In the same way, a linear molecule can rotate around a z-axis. So there won't be any kind of change in a position of those atoms. You can imagine that the molecule is rotating around a z-axis, and there is no energy required for this particular kind of rotation, and it is not considered. So number of rotational modes associated with a linear molecule, they are 2. Okay, while for a non-linear molecule there are 3 rotational modes active associated with it. So if you calculate now the number of degrees of freedom for a linear molecule, um, so this will be equal to total number of degrees of freedom would be equal to 3n, where n is the number of atoms present in a molecule, 3n, minus translational modes are 3, and the rotational modes for a linear molecule are 2. So this will be equal to 3n minus 5. While for a non-linear molecule, you have rotational modes to be 3. So the total modes, vibrational modes, will be equal to 3n minus 6. So for each molecule, you should be able to calculate number of vibrational modes. So this will give us an idea about how many different ways the molecule can vibrate and how many different frequencies accordingly it can absorb. So for a linear molecule, um, like carbon dioxide, the vibrational modes will be 3n minus 5. So here the number of atoms are 3. So 3 into 3, 9, minus 5, 4. So carbon dioxide has 4 different kinds of vibrational modes. Similarly, for a non-linear molecule, as with water, there are 3 atoms. So the total degrees of freedom would be 3 into 3, 9, minus 6. So this will be equal to 3. So total number of vibrational modes for a non-linear molecule like water here would be 3. Same way, now you calculate the vibrational modes for a methane. Now, what is the significance of calculating vibrational modes? As I've said, um, if you know how many different ways the molecule is deforming, um, it will give us an idea about how many bands we can expect in a IR spectra. All right. So if for methane, if the total vibrational modes are 9, means it can absorb those many wavelengths, different wavelengths, and it should give rise to these number of bands. But this generally doesn't happen because there are called as degenerate vibrations. Many vibrations occur at the same frequency. So generally, what we calculate in a theory doesn't seem to be there on the paper. So you can watch this video. I'm just posting this link, so you can watch it. So the concept of different modes of vibration will be clear to you. Okay, this is a time to test yourself. Look at those molecules and just see whether these molecules will be IR active or not. So you have to correlate this along with the concept of change in the dipole moment. You can see here nitrogen, hydrogen and oxygen. These are symmetric molecules and there is no net dipole moment associated with those molecules, and hence those symmetric molecules would be IR inactive, while HCl, HBr and H2O, these are asymmetric molecules have their own dipole moment, and hence they are IR active. Now see the classification of vibrational modes. There are two types of vibrations. One is stretching vibration and the other one is bending vibration. Stretching vibration is one in which there is a change in the interatomic distance while the bond angle remains the same. In case of bending vibration, there is change in the bond angle while the bond length remains the same. There is more amount of energy required for stretching vibration in comparison to bending vibration. Stretching vibration is again classified as a symmetric vibration and asymmetric vibration, while bending vibrations are classified as in plane and out of plane bending vibrations. Okay, so whenever the atoms which are vibrating, if they are going to define the same plane, remain in the same plane, we call them as an in plane bending vibration. While if while vibrating the atoms change their plane, we call them as out of plane bending vibration. In plane bending vibrations are classified as scissoring and rocking vibrations, while out of plane bending vibrations are again classified as wagging and twisting vibrations. So we'll look into the animations of those. So in case of stretching vibration, there is change in the bond length by 10 picometers, while in case of bending vibration, there is change in the bond angle by 4 degrees. Okay, so first kind of vibration is a stretching vibration wherein the bond length is being changed, bond angle is going to remain same, and we have classified it into two types, symmetric and asymmetric vibration. So suppose now here you have a CH2 group, a carbon is being attached to two hydrogens, and if both of the hydrogen are coming closer to carbon at the same time and going away from it, so we call this as an symmetric vibration. Means what? Both the bonds are contracting or elongating at the same time. So this is a symmetric vibration. Symmetric vibration is being seen at a lower frequency in comparison to asymmetric vibration. So in case of asymmetric vibration, you can see that when one bond is contracting, the another one is elongating. So this kind of vibration, you call this as an asymmetric vibration. In stretching vibration, there is change in bond length. While in case of bending vibrations, we have classified them into two types, in plane, and we know now in plane, the vibrating bond doesn't change their planes, while in out of plane vibration, the vibrating bond change their planes. So in plane vibrations are again classified into rocking and scissoring kind of vibration. So you can see the motion of different atoms. Say here the carbon is being connected to two hydrogens. If both of the hydrogens are moving towards one direction, so you call this as an in-plane rocking. So you can imagine out here when they are vibrating, means their bond angle is been changing. At that time, they are not leaving their plane. Okay, they are remaining in the plane originally they were. Okay, so you call this as an in plane, and as both of the atoms are moving in the same direction, so you'll call this as an in plane rocking. While in case of in plane scissoring, here also, why in plane? Because the atoms are remaining in the previous plane itself, they are not changing the plane. And scissoring, in a scissoring motion, it is exactly the way the scissor moves. The atoms, one atom is moving in the opposite direction to the another atom. Fine. So you call this as an in plane scissoring. In out of plane bending kind of vibrations, as the name suggests, it is out of plane, means the atoms are changing their planes from the previous plane. So first kind is wagging kind of vibration. So in case of wagging vibration, both the atoms will come closer to the observer at the same time, or they will move away from the observer at the same time. Fine. So you can see here in this particular motion, both of them are in agreement. They are coming closer to the observer at the same time. Okay. So they were initially, suppose, in a flat plane. They have left that plane and they have come out from the plane closer to the observer. Again, they have gone away from the observer. So while doing this, the initial plane is being changed. You call this as an out of plane wagging vibration. While in case of twisting, these two atoms are not there in agreement. When one is coming closer to the observer, the another one is going away from the observer. So you will call this as an out of plane twisting kind of vibration. Okay, now you just see those vibrations. It will be more clear to you. Now this is what is a twisting kind of vibration. So initially the atoms were in different plane and they are changing their plane. So you call this as a twisting kind of vibration. This is a rocking kind of vibration. Okay. The atoms are remaining in the same plane and they are all in agreement with each other. So this is a in plane rocking, while this is a out of plane wagging kind of vibration. So the atoms are moving in and out of the plane, okay, in agreement, and that's why you call this as a wagging kind of vibration. Okay, so just test yourself. What kind of vibration is it? Okay, this is a symmetric stretching vibration. Stretching. This is asymmetric stretching vibration. The bond length is been changing and the atoms are not in agreement. So this is asymmetric stretching kind of vibration. What is this? This is a bending kind of vibration, and whether it is in plane, yes, it is in plane. Okay, and the atoms are not in agreement. They are going in opposite direction. Does it look like a Caesar? Yes, it is. So it's a in plane scissoring kind of vibration. Okay, what is this? It's a in plane, correct? So the atoms are not changing their plane, so it is in plane. The atoms are in agreement, okay? So they are rocking in a dancing mode. So they are rocking. So it is in a rocking phase. Okay, what is this? The atoms are not remaining in the previous plane, correct? So they are leaving the plane. One is coming towards you, another one is going away from you. So it looks like a twisting. And what is this? Again, here you can see this is out of plane vibration. What the atoms are changing their plane. They are coming, both of them are coming closer to you at the same time and going away from you at the same time. So this is out of plane wagging vibration. Thank you.